What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down?
Well, good morning, Rati. I guess I should say good afternoon. You're in London, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in Cambridge. It's about 6 p.m., but it's already dark because winter.
Yes, yes. Well, so we're here today, Magnolia Moonshot 2030. I'm Darcy Winslow, and we're here today with Rati Aftab. And we're going to hear a little bit about her story and the connection to the Magnolias. It's so inspiring. But first, I want to just say a little bit about Magnolia Moonshot 2030. This is part of the Sprout series conversations that we're having with other women around the world to talk about some of the issues that we're affected by most, but we're also stepping into leadership positions around climate justice, around all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and really looking at equity and equality in all forms. And we do this through tapping into our collective consciousness, our divine feminine voices, our leadership characteristics, and to really approach these very challenging issues through love and well-being for all things. So that's why we're here today. And if I can just maybe ask you to tell your story about how you came to create This Is Us, Discover, a cohort of teen girls in Pakistan over the last year or so.
Yeah, of course. So I guess if generally This Is Us has been a social impact initiative that has been kind of grounded in this need to build confidence within young women and to take up the space, especially in South Asia. So that's kind of the context within which This Is Us grew. It's me and two of my sisters. It's kind of an initiative that was grown by us along with my parents. But I think specifically, if I were to talk about This Is Us Discover, I think that is rooted in kind of the pandemic. So initially, when we started off, the way we kind of worked was we launched a few marathons, things in ways in which women can take part in the public space and how they can take up space. However, with the pandemic, unfortunately, I think one of the things was that we couldn't have these large gatherings anymore, but we were still trying to understand how we can create that impact. And one of the biggest things that I think we realized was that this pandemic was actually disproportionately affecting young girls, and especially within these spaces where these girls often now had no more space to have these conversations. Women were disproportionately affected in the way they now took on unpaid care work. I think there's a lot of kind of facts and figures that you can find around the effects of the pandemic on women. But essentially, this is something that was affecting us because I think I saw it in the way that I reacted to the pandemic, where I kind of lost this sense of like role modeling, which I think is a lot of what women grow through and the processes and having these support networks. So I think that's kind of where then This Is Us Discover grew from. This need that although women need to take up space in the public sphere, there's still a need that they have within their own homes where they're not being provided with these opportunities to grow, to build their confidence, to have these support networks. So I guess that's kind of where this idea of This Is Us Discover grew from. And I think one of the ways that we were fortunate was that actually having it be online actually meant that we could access people across the world. So in a way that maybe when we would have had this, if this idea had come to us in a time where we would have decided to do it in person, we wouldn't have access to people across the world in India, where you're in America. Like we wouldn't have had these conversations with people. So I think we were really lucky in that way. And I think the other thing that was also something that enabled us for this to be bigger than we had ever intended was the fact that if this had been in person, a lot of women and girls would not have had the choice to join us in Pakistan, maybe if this was a long 2-week thing that had been in person, because it's just not something that would have been feasible in a place where it's already very conservative. So I think that's kind of where This Is Us Discover grew from during the pandemic. And I think like it was the pandemic that allowed it to be as big as it was and to have the impact that it had that I don't think it would have otherwise had.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I found so interesting was the girls chose their areas of research. Could you just tell a couple of stories about some of the areas? Because, you know, hearing the presentation and hearing the research that they did was so inspiring. And these are very, very difficult issues that they were dealing with. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so essentially, when we were like help kind of thinking of ideas or what like projects could look like, kind of the way we had to go about it was, I think one, as you grow older, you actually sometimes can lose a sense of creativity. And I think like when we were brainstorming the kind of ideas, the ways that like we were thinking, having been out of the schools, like schooling and now being in university, was we were thinking very much in an academic sense. We were thinking, okay, like beauty standards, mental health, stuff like that. But the way our ideas were coming out, we only imagined it in terms of presentations, academic presentations. But then these ideas, the way they materialized was amazing. So for example, one of the kind of ideas we spoke about was women's domestic violence, abuse, the effect of beauty standards on women's mental health. And the way they came out was there was this one particular project, which was a video. And within that video, from the music to the poems recited, everything had been done by the girls in that group, which was insane because I would have never thought to go and make music or to go and write a poem or write a story. So that was just one way. Then the other way was the making of like a magazine. And this was about, so one was on the beauty standards and how that affects mental health. And then there was a similar one that was produced like a magazine and in which they kind of tried to make an archive. So I think like just the ways that that came out it was not only the topics, because I think these topics are all often tackled in academia, it's tackled by businesses, but it was the way in which it was tackled that I think was really cool for me to see. So yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, child marriage, gender equity, gender violence, education, financial literacy. I mean, you guys just blew us away with what you accomplished. You personally, what did you learn from this experience? And what shift did you see in the young girls during their time in the Discover cohort?
Yeah. I mean, I think like when we started the process, I was a bit very almost. I was like afraid that it wouldn't have the success or impact it could have, just because I felt like, I think this is a very like lack of confidence that comes in as being a woman launching something or working on something. I was like, how could something that I've worked on be of this much impact? Like I'm only a university student. So I think it helped me break down a lot of those barriers in my head. And then it also helped me see, like, in some ways, see my own privilege in what I'd been given and the way my dad has like always empowered us in the choices that we make, but then how other people didn't have those options. So like when we did this program, there were people from 8 different cities within Pakistan, and that there's a lot of diversity within there, because I've lived in a big city in Karachi, but there are a lot of other cities where people don't have access to the opportunities that they do. And I think providing that access in a way like opened my own eyes to the way that the impact that I had on their lives. So I think that's the way in which I think it opened up my eyes a bit more.
Great.
And then I think there were also like transferable skills in there for me that I didn't realize every day, sitting down every day, hosting a program, which was very exciting. But I think most of what was most heartening about that program was the impact that it had on the girls that was like most heartening to me. And I think it was that, so essentially like I think one of the ways that I realized people learn to role model is through the people that they have around us. And when for example, I went to a school where a lot of people go off to universities like Cambridge or go off to university Ivies. And but the only reason I thought I could get to where I am now is because I had someone to role model. And I think providing that access, providing that network, broadening horizons meant that these girls could now see themselves beyond where they saw themselves. So for example, that kind of barrier had now been broken down because they said, look, I can be a woman, but also do this and also be successful. So I think that is one of the biggest things for me, because I think because I see that in myself, that I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not had role models, had I not looked up, been able to see people actually doing things like this. So I think that was one of the biggest things about the biggest shift I saw in those girls is where they came in saying, oh, I think I need to be a doctor, but actually I love creative writing. And actually meeting someone who was maybe like doing some creative writing, working in academia and being, oh, actually that can be me. I don't have to be a doctor just because that's the one thing I've been told my whole life. And then just like adding on to that is just kind of the support system that was built through this. So like so a lot of the things was based on like a mentor-mentee relationship.
Right.
So kind of how those relationships carried on, but also, so I'm part of like, we have alumni groups, and then the way kind of, if there's an opportunity that comes up, people are so willing to share it on that group to be like, hey, I think this would be relevant to you. Like, I think this is a great thing that you should apply for. Or like, I've had people that still reach out to me and being like, I'm applying for university. Do you think you could have a call with me? Do you think I could talk to you? Or do you think you could put me in touch with this person? And that's the power of a network. That's the power of a support system. And yeah.
That's fabulous. And just a quick shout out to your dad, Conwer. Conwer, we met, he was a fellow in the Academy for Systems Change that I had the honor of being president for about 10 years. So he is an amazing, amazing man. And I love that story of stepping into your own power, your own voice, finding your voice. So that's great. Your dad did share a quick story with me about how this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, how this benefited in you landing your first job outside of university.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that was like also surprising in some ways to me, because I interned at BlackRock last summer, which yeah, and basically essentially like when I was interviewing for them, everyone on my final stage of my interview was like, this interview is going to be so technical, like you need to be prepared with your technicals. And I went in with a global head of the team that I wanted to intern with, and all she asked me about was This Is Us. And my whole 30-minute interview, I remember just being like, is there going to be more? And then she just asked me about This Is Us because it was something that was like so interesting to them. But I think the way that I was thinking about this, and I was like, how does it connect to why was it important to them? Why did they ask me about it? Why did they care so much? And I think one of the reasons that what drew me to BlackRock as a firm was that I cared a lot about a place which had purpose, which had a good culture, and which had good values. I'm not a very corporate person. I've never been. So I think like I was not willing to work at a place where I didn't align with its purpose. I didn't align with their values. And when I found that within BlackRock, which is why I applied and I was very interested in the process. But I think the way I saw that come back to me was the way in which they were interested in my own process, my purpose, my values. And I think that came out a lot in This Is Us, because I think everyone can do a lot of tasks, can have technical skills, but what is your purpose? What are your values? What are you taking to a place? And I think that's where This Is Us came in for me. So yeah, I think like that's why a lot of our conversation was like, oh, so how did you do that? And how did that work out for you? How did that impact those girls? And I think that's kind of why I think This Is Us connected so well with landing that job, was because it helped show my purpose and the things that I held dear, and that connected really well with a firm, which in the future I think most firms will require purpose and value to get ahead as companies. And yeah, I wanted to add to that, but I feel like I'll just like
no, that's fabulous to be so clear on what you're looking for and to not just settle for anything, your first job, and to have that alignment. And that they saw that in you. That's really powerful. This is such a great example. You inspired, This Is Us Discover inspired yet another cohort of teen girls in Europe who were really focused on climate and ecofeminism, and they just drew so much inspiration from you. If you were to give some words of advice for other young women, teen girls, to do similar things that you did, how do you activate? How do you get started? What inspired you No, we can cut that out. We already talked about what inspired you, but what advice would you give to other young girls to get involved, to really dig deep into what's important to them and to bring others along?
Yeah. I think like one of the first things when I was thinking about this is it's not just about passion, because I think a lot of us women, a lot of girls grow up with things they're very interested in, things they want to change, things they're passionate about, but it's something psychological that sometimes hinders us from making that move. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome in that. I remember like This Is Us, when we worked on imposter syndrome, I was like, wow, like this is something we all really need to work on. There's so much in it. So I think it's the doing, like it's the just saying, I'm going to do this, and I might not get it right. I might not do it right the first time, but there's something in there that I want to work on. So I think it's thinking beyond that, because I think one of the biggest things I've learned, like since I've come to university, where I've had these conversations with, like, sorry to make this gendered again, but with guys and with girls, the difference between guys is that they might not get it right, but they have this confidence to just do it. And I think obviously because of the patriarchy, the way society is structured, women tend to not be able to just do it. And I think that just doing it comes from literally having to move beyond that mindset of imposter syndrome, of lacking confidence. So I think that is one thing that I do think about, is that doing it and then evaluating how far you've actually come. Because I've never met a woman who's done something and really regretted a situation like this. It's been actually, you've been surprised at how much people connect with what you're trying to achieve. So I think there's definitely that, but I also know like that's not that easy. It's easier said than done. So other than that, just in terms of advice, is I think just trying to connect with people who have a similar purpose to you, because I think that is one of the most important things. That if there's someone that inspires you, who has done something that you want to do, reach out to them. Like I really enjoy studying about partition, and one of my favorite authors was someone who wrote about it. And I remember like in 2019, I just wrote her a long message and was like, I love your work, this is that, and like just got talking to her. So I think like just something that would be a better way to just know that your purpose is aligned with someone out there, and there will be some
Right.
impact to be had. So yeah, I guess those are two things about the way that I would think about advice that I would give someone. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Well, and you said just do it several times. And my background, as you know, is
Nice.
Nike. And, you know, where that came about was too often we think, oh, we talk ourselves out of it. But,
Yeah.
you know, the just do it, you know, don't think about going for a run, just do it. Just get out there and do it. It may not be your best, but you're going to get something from that. The other thing that I really appreciated that you brought out, and this was actually, you know, advice that another woman gave, was have a mentor and be a mentor. And, you know, like we talked about, it is time for women to step into their full power. And the challenges that we face are so great, but we can do it together and to learn from each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Any last words, Rati?
But thank you so much for having me. I hope I was able to give something of value in this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah.
And
Thank you.
can I put you on the spot?
Yes.
How old were you when you started this process?
I would say like 18, 19.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. We need
Still
more of
only
you in the
21.
world. Well, thank you, Rati. And we will be connected, and any way we can support you in your work. And This Is Us Discover, we are here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens?